Welcome, Red Eyes members. Thank you very much for tuning in. We are talking to John Irvin about his latest book, The Holy Mushroom. And I'd like to begin just to talk a little bit about, going back again, talking about Gordon Wasson and also John Allegro, of course. And these guys were, Gordon Wasson died back in 86, and then Mark Allegro died back in 88. So do you know, Jan, if these guys were at it, so to speak, at each other's throats all the way to the end, or did this die off after a while?
Well, after the discussion between the two in the Times Literary Supplement and the private letter from Wasson, at that point Allegro just walked away from Wasson and ignored him until he died on his birthday in February of 88. And I've actually found evidence that Wasson carried the argument on for another 16 years at least. I believe it was October. He did an interview with Robert Forte, or I think it was Robert Forte. He did an interview with, and Wasson was still saying the same diatribe even 16 years later. But there are people who have argued that Wasson started changing his position, but what I show in the book is that they don't have any evidence, and then the evidence that they do provide, it actually refutes itself when I present the larger picture. But Wasson at least carried the argument on, and I know he was also sending comments about Allegro to other researchers in his private letters, and one of the private letters to a Mr. Hamilton I republished in the book. So it seems that Wasson never got over it.
What if we get into some of the meat of the matter, so to speak? Maybe we can talk a little bit about symbolism, and of course you mentioned this in the finishing paragraph, if you will, of the first segment, that Jesus was a mushroom. Let's talk a little bit about that then, and talk about some of the evidence for that. Primarily, symbolism is something that many people look at. They look at murals, they look at old paintings and illuminated manuscripts. But beyond that, is there anything more to say about it and to go into, John?
Well, if we want to sit there and, like I mentioned earlier, the symbolism of the Eucharist and the eat my blood, drink my flesh sort of thing, and if we think about a lot of the Maya culture, one of the words that was used in Maya for the mushroom was teonanacatl, which meant flesh of God, and that was their word for the mushroom. And if we look at the similarities between these religions, and we think of Jesus saying, eat my flesh, drink my blood, and we try not, and instead if we look at the similarities instead of the differences, it's hard to separate the two. Now, as far as additional evidence, my new book, I published 43 images, and probably, I would say, at least 36 of them have never been published before as far as ethnomycology. One of them we revealed in the Pharmacratic Inquisition video last year, the image of St. Walburga holding the mushroom up from the 7th century. But, as far as new symbolism, there's so much I don't know, focusing specifically on Jesus. I mentioned the Montefrain du Périgord image. And then I also mentioned Professor John Rush's book, which uses the imagery from the basilica at Mark's Basilica in Venice. So that is one of the more important pieces for really showing it, because in the image from St. Mark's Basilica, Jesus is holding a mushroom in one hand, and then he's pointing at his other hand, and his right hand is pointed at his face. So he's holding the mushroom in one hand, pointing literally at his right hand, pointed at his face. So it's almost like a gang sign, like, this is me. And it's a really interesting picture because, when you study Christian art, and as John Rush points out, and as we've talked about too in prior lectures and things like that, is that pointing is very important. You want to pay attention to where their eyes are looking, where the X marks the spot. A lot of times they'll be holding a cross, and it's where the cross is pointed, that marks a certain spot in a painting that's important.
Yeah.
And the pointing fingers and things like that. So this one, Jesus is actually standing between 5 mushrooms, and down below is Adam and Eve, and which is a lot of interesting symbolism going on there. But I would recommend your listeners read John Rush's book Failed God, and look at this image on the front cover. It's very fascinating, and I've had about 9 months to research more into St. Mark's Basilica, and I found dozens more images from that basilica that reveal the mushroom in my own studies. And there's certain areas of that basilica that are almost not photographed at all. One of the main sections when you walk into the basilica on the right side, they don't let people congregate there, and they don't, when the tourists come through, they rush them through very quickly through that one area. So, but if you look up and to the right, going up into the archway, is this huge Jesus standing in the field of mushrooms, holding this big mushroom cap.
Oh.
And
why do you think they still have it?
I just wanted to.
Oh, sorry to interrupt there, but why do you think they still have it up there in the church altogether? They would potentially want to remove it, right?
Well, they might, but at the same time, this is still a basilica that's used, and I would suggest that it's still a part of the ancient Christian mystery teachings. And, that's one of the things that Professor Rush is adamant about. He feels that when his book gets out there far enough, that they probably will try and destroy the mural or the basilica itself.
Well, okay. And
but what they don't realize, though, is that we've got between the two of us, we've got about 1,000 images that depict all of this. And Rush is working on a new book next year that's going to be mushrooms in Christian art, and it's going to have, several hundred images of just mushrooms in Christian art, which is what I did similarly in the back of the new book, The Holy Mushroom. I've actually got one image with an angel holding up 3 mushrooms in his hand directly underneath Jesus that is also holding a mushroom up. I've got the tree of Jesse depicted as mushrooms. I've got Jesus entering Jerusalem, 3 or 4 different pictures that show mushrooms. It's just there's so much of it, and what I have found is that for every 500 or 600 images that I go through, I'll find 1 or 2 just wow images that just completely blow me away. But if you look subtly in the folds of clothing, the colors of clothing, and background designs and things like that, you'll see a lot more of the mushroom symbolism there.
Yes.
But the ones where they're very straightforward and blatant about it are a lot harder to find. But like I said, we do have about 1,000 of the more blatant ones.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned, the dresses. We can look at some of the priests themselves. They are dressed like mushrooms, particularly related to the colors, of course. And this is something that you guys pointed out in the Pharmacratic Inquisition, the DVD and the lecture that you guys did. And
right.
Again, this is something that is startling once you begin to discover it. So do you think that still implies then that they have knowledge about this, the priest, or they just following the structure, the order of the church, and doesn't themselves really think that much about it? What do you think?
Well, I think at least everyone from cardinal or bishop above knows about it. And one thing that you have to realize that Jack Herod talks about and that John Rush talks about is that all of the artwork that was designed had to be sanctioned by the Catholic Church. I mean, these pieces of art weren't done by mistake. They were commissioned pieces of artwork, and they were given specific instructions of how to paint them. And in fact, the people involved in the artwork orders were initiated. And even the people today, Rush suggests, they are still initiated today because they have to get in and work closely with these pieces of art, and if they weren't initiated, they would see a lot more than obviously the church would want them to see. So as well, there are I've got a couple of images from Russia in the new book that from the early 1800s, about 1811, 1813, that clearly show the mushroom. Let's see if I can find a reference to one of them right here, and I'll read it to you.
Mm-hmm.
It should be. I've got an image here. It's called The Trinity of the Old Testament, 1811, from the Museum of Fine Arts, Russia. And just to describe it to your readers, there are 3 chalices shown on a table filled with a red drink with white spots, symbolic of the Amanita muscaria. And each, there's basically 3 chalices that are mushroom-shaped, sitting on the table, and they look like goblets or cups, and or wine glasses, and they're filled literally with a red and white spotted drink. And then in the forefront is an image of a character slaying the bull, just as in Mithraism. So in this one image, we have evidence of the ties to Mithraism as well as the ties to the Amanita muscaria. So we can show evidence up to the 19th century of mushrooms in Judeo-Christianity, and as far as currently, there are a few projects going on right now to reveal mushrooms up to the present, and then we also have I published textual evidence from the 16th century in the Holy Mushroom. There was a text that I found, or actually somebody had sent it to me, and it was in my one of my review boxes for 7 months before I remembered and went back to look at it. And that is a text from a monastery in Greece called Zerpantmou Monastery on the Mount Athos Peninsula on the Three Finger Islands there, where I have myself visited. And when I was there, I was thinking, surely one of these monasteries has to have symbolism of the mushroom in it, and that's where this document came from, was actually from where I was at that time. So the document is called The Epistle to the Renegade Bishops, and that's what I named my book after. Is in this document, this guy Ivan Wyszynski, who wrote the document, is discussing the holy mushroom and how when the Roman Church came and tried to overtake the Orthodox Greeks, the mushroom rose up, the holy mushroom rose up out of the table and stopped the Romans from taking over, from the Roman Catholics from taking over, and all of the infirm were healed by the mere possibility of tasting the holy mushroom. And it also states very clearly in this document that it was sent to all of Christendom at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, now not only do we have a direct, straightforward statement about the holy mushroom and about its miracles, but we also have a statement about it being the knowledge of the mushroom being sent to everybody, or this particular miracle being sent to everybody in the church. So obviously, it wasn't a secret.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about. I'm thinking back of your conversation you had with John Rush. I believe you guys talked a little bit about some of the few kind of remaining Gnostic sects in and around Iraq. I'm thinking of the Mandeans being one of them, and they've even been referred to, I think, as devil worshipper. But do you know if they have some kind of retelling of this story of the?
Well, of course they do, and there's certainly not devil worshippers. And what happens is you get